This is a thing of extreme beauty and wonder.
Yeah, but a lot of things are of extreme beauty and wonder. It's all about the time you put into it.
Yeah.
I never considered this an artwork. A lot of people would consider it an artwork, but that's because they don't know what art is. It's a machine. It's a machine, and certainly it's a machine of certain beauty, and it can be used, hopefully, to create art with. But it's not an artwork because it's fully functional. It doesn't ask any question. It's a finished object, just as well as a cup is a finished object.
Mm-hmm.
You can use a cup to create art with, no doubt. However, it's a finished. I mean, it works. It doesn't really ask any questions. It's a finished machine that works in its own right. I mean, it's just like my watch is not a piece of art. However, some people. So generally speaking, being fascinated by a mechanical process, or being fascinating about the time that I put into something does not necessarily make it an artwork. I'm not saying it's nothing. I'm just saying that it's a well-functioning machine.
Yeah.
And it can be used for art. And we can try to create some art with it right now, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
The thing is, you've made it aesthetically pleasing.
But a lot of things are aesthetically pleasing. The little teddy bear that you have for your British citizenship is aesthetically pleasing, just a different aesthetic. But
it's a mass-produced aesthetic as opposed to something.
Yeah, but then again, what mass-producing is also. Yeah, I understand that. But mass-producing is. This could be mass-produced. It just would take a longer time. It just depends on how we could mass-produce these. It also depends what the mass is. But I understand what you're saying. I'm just questioning if complexity necessarily leads to art. That's basically what I'm saying. Or questioning. And I put myself instead of.
I think art is a lot like pornography in the sense that it's almost impossible to define, but you know it when you see it.
That's quite a good way of putting it, I guess. Yeah.
Well, that was the old argument about pornography, is that nude photographs can be considered art. But there's a certain lascivity that you believe.
You can tell the difference, yeah.
Yeah, and you can't define it, you just know it when you see it. So.
Yeah. You see, I kind of think that this thing would sit very happily in a gallery or a...
Oh, certainly, but it would still be a machine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Everybody would refer to it as the one Goodiepal used at his shows.
Yeah.
Nobody would refer to it as a piece in itself. It's not a Mona Lisa.
No. Oh, there we go. And that's it, making noises. And and just so the listeners realise that this is entirely mechanical. There's no electronics going on at all with this.
It's entirely mechanical, yeah.
And it makes noises that sound almost like they are electronic noises, or noises that you'd expect to hear from kind of forms of electronica, but in an entirely mechanical way. So you can feel free to make some noises with that.
Sure. Then what I usually do is I have done for a long time, but I blow. I like I was very fascinated. It's a long time since I don't think I've had it out for at least 6-7 years. I don't think I've had it out for. So I haven't. But what I was interested in at the time was I was interested in having it divided between having the mechanical part below the ground. So you see there's a scenario up here, a tableau, and then there's the mechanical part was below down there, and they were kept separated. I wouldn't do that today, but I was very interested in having an artificial world up there, but having the gears down there, and I was interested in that sort of cosmology of having those things separated. And so I tried to do a fully functional tableau up there, and I tried to have the machinery down here.
It just occurs to me what it reminds me of, which goes back to a little bit of what we were discussing last night. For the listeners who don't realise, last night we had quite a lengthy discussion about Dungeons and Dragons, and it reminds me a little bit, and we talked about Games Workshop who make miniatures, and I think you were saying that some of the parts in that are from like lead miniatures and things like that.
Yeah.
And it reminds me, it's only just hit me that it reminds me a little bit of dioramas that they used to put in.
Yeah, certainly. That goes as a big inspiration, I guess. It definitely plays with those aesthetics. And I mean the main difference here is that it has a automata
Yeah.
incorporated. What else can you say about it? Which goes like, I mean, I think that at my age, people are way too concerned about what they describe as art and what they don't describe as art. When I was a child and we did plain lit figures and tin soldiers and things like that, we were all very aesthetically interested, and we were all discussing aesthetics on a high level. We talked aesthetics all day, but if anybody had pointed at us and said, "Oh, you're talking about art now," we would have been like, it had destroyed the whole thing. We were talking because we were talking about it on our own. In our own undefined rules, we were trying to define certain rules of what you could do with these things and what you couldn't, etc., etc. That's an art discussion we had. I mean, there was art discussion going on for a long time. For hours a day, we were talking about this. The same way when I started programming computers and things. There was also there was a huge aesthetic discussion in that, which didn't really fit under. I mean, we didn't know that we were talking about. Art, and the point here is that I think there's too much talk about where art starts and where art stops these days. I think that's too much of a discussion of where it starts and where it stops. I think generally speaking, I mean we had huge aesthetic discussions when we were painting figures for various role-playing games, and that was I just never stopped. So that's also why it's a floating process. I could still talk about role-playing games for hours, and I would actually do it with the same enthusiasm that I would talk about any sort of contemporary art. I don't see any. Well, I do see, of course, I do see. It's not that I say there's no difference, because there is a sociological difference. I mean, the way people approach it. You don't go to galleries and find Games Workshop figures. And I would also argue that Games Workshop figures are no longer art. They have been art, but they are probably no longer. Or they get harder and harder to squeeze the art out of Games Workshop figures. But that's a completely different. But I wasn't just painting Games Workshop figures when I was young, so it doesn't really. But it's also about. It's also about when the things are alive and when they're not, and I think that's much more Western world. Well, it's a Western world art thing that's mushed down to the way of seeing a lot of approaching objects in general. But what it basically comes down to, and what I think is the problem, is that we're told how to appreciate certain objects as art, and not to appreciate other objects as art, out from a Western world way of looking at it. And inside that, there's also the hunt for the new, which I've always considered to be a bit suspicious. But that's a very Western world idea. The one, is it done before, then it's not relevant, and that's a completely lame idea to deal with. I think you should try to replace new with alive. It's very simple. If you can perform a piece, a Renaissance piece of lute music, and make it alive, you can make it relevant in a room while you perform it. Well, it certainly has a relevance, just as well as any piece by Christian Wolff, or any sort of abstract notated piece of a so-called modern music, which people, I mean, you talked about The Wire before. They still talk about modern music. They talk about this and that. I mean, it doesn't really make any sense to talk about what. I mean, if it makes sense, if it's alive, then it. I mean, if it and things can be dead and then turn alive, and that goes back to the Games Workshop figures. I think it's very hard to squeeze life out of Games Workshop figures at the moment, but it didn't used to be like that. And it might not be like that in the future. You might be able to do that again, but at the moment, I think Games Workshop is a rather dead thing, and I don't consider that to have anything to do with art. However, when I was younger, I can feel that we have the same aesthetical discussions about painting Games Workshop figures as I would later have with a lot of my friends talking about whatever they're doing, other kind of objects which they place in space and time. So let's get it running. I'll do like this. And then I will blow life into the bird. Just like that. I think we're all...
Yeah.
Something like that.
That's a fantastic thing.
Yep.